Good evening, and isn't it a beautiful evening on this divine day of dedication? As we continue to commemorate our country's 50th anniversary of independence, our beloved St. Agnes is blessed to celebrate our 178th anniversary. We are pleased to continue in the spirit of gratitude for such a momentous milestone, particularly as we pay homage to the memory of Archdeacon William Edward Thompson. We are looking forward to an evening of enlightenment as we explore the promotion of Christian values in an emerging Bahamas, which will be brought to us by a most distinguished gentleman, Sir Burton Hall, retired Chief Justice of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, who will be expertly introduced later in the program. We will have the opportunity to take notes, which you have space for in that easily accessible part of your program. We will also be able to ask questions of our lecturer for the evening. Now, I ask you all to stand as we begin with our opening hymn, which is found in your program. Such a beautiful song. I'll ask us all to remain standing as we welcome Father Ruel Strawn to do the welcoming prayer.
Let us pray. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Almighty God, to whose glory we celebrate the dedication of this house of prayer, we give you thanks for the fellowship of those who've worshipped in this place, and we pray that all who seek you here may find you and be filled with your joy and peace. And now, O Father, direct our works with your holy inspiration, and carry them on by your gracious assistance, that our every prayer and our every work may begin in you and through you, and be happily completed for Jesus Christ's sake. Amen. Amen.
You may be seated. At this time, we will welcome young Nyla Simonet to welcome us to this evening's event.
My Lord Bishop and Mrs. Boyd, Archbishop Drexel Gomez, Archdeacon Keith Cartwright, Mrs. Rose Thompson, Sir Burton Hall and Mrs. Hall, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. My name is Nyla Simonet, and I am honored to have been asked to give the welcome this evening. Did you know that you are indeed in the best place to be on this 12th of July 2023? Celebrating with my home church of St. Agnes, as we celebrate 178 years since our church has been dedicated to the service of God and man. Give yourselves a round of applause for that. Thank you. We are truly happy that you have chosen to join us for this evening's lecture and memorial to Archdeacon William Thompson, who served faithfully and lovingly as rector for 32 years. Archdeacon Thompson was the very first son of the parish to become rector, and our second longest serving rector. He was an advocate for many, and was very concerned about the social and educational development of the over-the-hill communities. He is still heralded and fondly remembered, even today, for his many valuable contributions in this regard. Tonight's lecture was instituted as a tribute to his memory and became a part of the dedication celebrations when Archdeacon Brown was rector. Were he here with us today, sitting alongside his beautiful wife Rose, Archdeacon Thompson would be smiling in agreement and thrilled to have Sir Burton Hall as the guest speaker, a man of stature, honor, and his fellow giant of St. John's College. Welcome one and all. Thank you again for joining us. We hope you leave enriched, inspired, and more aware of the rich heritage of our church and legacy of our dear Archdeacon William Thompson. Thank you.
May we have another round of applause for young Nyla Simonet. Just to also say, St. Agnes is very proud of Ms. Simonet, as she was recently a runner-up in the National Primary School Student of the Year Awards recently. At this time, we now invite Father James Moultrie to do the introduction of our esteemed speaker. Father Moultrie.
My Lord Bishops, all of whom are sons of St. Agnes, as is the current rector and archdeacon, and all of us are so proud of them. Now, two members of St. Agnes called me and asked me to do this. And I thought both of them were more than qualified to do it. One was his neighbor, growing up as they did in Mason's Edition, and the other one was called to the bar when he was the Chief Justice. And I thought they could very easily do a better job, but they told me, no, you know him long time. And that is true. And so it's an honor for me to introduce this distinguished Bahamian. I want you to know, you will listen to the finest mind, one of the finest minds this country has produced. By the time he's done, you will agree with that statement. He's also one of the finest Bahamians. He has a very impressive record, unmatched in our country. A man of great honor, has risen to the heights in all of the professions. But it all began at St. John's College. Now, I went elsewhere. But I wasn't a fool. I married a girl from St. John's College. And so it is an honor, I'm sure, to St. John's, where he served as head boy, an honor to St. Agnes and St. Matthew, where his roots are buried deep, and an honor to all of us who know him so well. You have read in the booklet his record. You have read more than I can say. But the one thing that you did not read that I can say is that this is my brother-in-law. I was smart enough to marry his sister. And so I got in the family edgewise. But we were youngsters together, lived together, got married together. I got married on the 2nd of August. He got married on the 3rd of August. So his mother, the imitable Rose Hall King, had a wedding on Saturday and a wedding on Sunday, which means she had to have 2 outfits. But she raised such fine children, all 8 of them are blessings to all of us. And the Hall children are here, 2 of them are here. Both of them following in the footsteps of their father, although their mother was smarter than all of them. Because look who she married. But they are following in the footsteps of the father in the law. I had the honor and privilege. When he retired as Chief Justice, I was a member of the Judicial and Legal Service Commission. And we have a say in retiring and appointing judges. I say no more. I'm looking at a couple that got appointed while I served. And I am extremely proud of them. This fine gentleman, you will determine for yourself one of the finest minds this country has ever produced. I pray that in the footsteps of Willie, who was also one of the finest minds this country has produced. All with a St. John's College background. Now, I'm sorry I didn't go there. But all of my children went to St. Anne. That's because we lived in the East. And it was easier. But this is really wonderful that we should have such a distinguished speaker who has climbed the ladder. I mean, you don't just go to The Hague. You hardly ever get to visit The Hague. But to work there for what, 11 years, 12 years, and still a permanent member of judicial staff? Ladies and gentlemen, you heard enough from me. I'm not preaching a sermon today. I'm just introducing my friend, my brother-in-law, my brother, Sir Burton.
Father Jimmy has emphasized, please be seated. Father Jimmy has emphasized the familial relationship. And of course, as we all know, the persons who are best likely to embarrass you in public are your relatives. So they're squirming with all the things he's saying about me, the exaggeration and so forth. But there are 3 great domains of human action. First comes the domain of positive law, where our actions are prescribed by laws which must be obeyed. Next comes the domain of free choice, which includes all those actions as to which we claim and enjoy complete freedom. But between these 2, there is a third large and important domain in which there rules neither positive law nor absolute freedom. In that domain, there is no law which inexorably determines our course of action, and yet we feel that we are not free to choose as we would. The degree of this sense of a lack of complete freedom in this domain's value varies in every case. It grades from a consciousness of a duty nearly as strong as positive law to a feeling that the matter is all but a question of personal choice. Some might wish to parcel out this domain into separate countries, calling one, for instance, the domain of duty, another the domain of public spirit, another the domain of good form. But I prefer to look at it as all one domain, for it has one and the same characteristic throughout. It is the domain of obedience to the unenforceable. The obedience is the obedience of a man to that which he cannot be forced to obey. He is the enforcer of the law upon himself. My Lord Bishop Boyd, Archdeacon Cartwright, Archbishop Gomez, Bishop Thompson, Reverend gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, and I must single out young Miss Neely, thank you, Simonet. See, that's what happens when you have seen too many summers. For her welcome and how brave she was standing up here. I remind myself that I was well into my 20s before I could get up before a crowd without stuttering and my shyness limiting my ability to present myself. So we look forward to great things from you, young Miss Simonet. Good evening. When I was contacted by Ms. Fox on behalf of the organizing committee to offer my reflections on the chosen subject, I expressed my hesitation because since demitting office as head of the judiciary in this country and as a member of the international judiciary, I have consistently eschewed public comment on any matter of social and political controversy. Moreover, observing the ceaseless commentary, both wise and otherwise, across the breadth of traditional news sources, print and electronic, and amplified by the modern ubiquity of social media, on whether the Bahamas is a Christian nation, I was apprehensive lest I be perceived as merely adding to the cacophony. What does the concept Christian values mean? I will not venture into the arcane theological excursions into the implications of the doctrines of the Incarnation or the Trinity, nor become lost in the thorny thicket of denominational differences, nor engage in disputations about liturgical practices, all of which are beyond my competence. I approach the assigned subject as an ordinary person in the pew, drawing on my formal training in the law and supplemented by my continuing exploration of the ideas which have formed and informed human development from antiquity to the present, along with my observations and experiences over the more than 75 years that God has granted me on this plane of existence. I would begin by stating the obvious. Christian values is lifted directly from the preamble to our Constitution, which you all know well, which reads in pertinent parts, whereas the people of this family of islands, recognizing that the preservation of their freedom will be guaranteed by a national commitment to self-discipline, industry, loyalty, unity, and an abiding respect for Christian values and the rule of law, we, recognizing the supremacy of God and believing in the fundamental rights and freedoms of the individual, do hereby proclaim the establishment of a free and democratic sovereign nation founded on spiritual values in which no man, woman, or child shall ever be slave or bondsman to anyone, or their labor exploited, or their lives frustrated by deprivation. And as with the other principles therein enumerated, it cannot be exhaustively defined and is best understood as aspirational and attitudinal. Anyone who has even a cursory knowledge of constitutional law knows well that the preamble has to be understood apart from the substantive provisions of the Constitution, and among the more remarkable, the sarcastic tone is intended, views that I have heard locally over the years is that this phrase, Christian values, which is not part of the law of the Constitution, should be repealed as it is inconsistent with the articles in the Constitution which confer justiciability on freedom of conscience, assembly, and association. Associated with this notion is the slavish and uncritical adoption of that hardy perennial from our neighbor to the northwest. That is a wall of separation between church and state. The polar extremes of this line of reasoning would either wholly exclude the views and voices of any faithful adherents to religious belief and practice from the public square, on the premise that religion should be a purely private matter, or at the other end, that religious liberty is the freedom to do anything and everything one wants under the name of religion, and that some particular religion has domination over others, including secular authorities. I decline to engage this controversy in my comments this evening. When the Bahamas unashamedly declared an abiding respect for Christian values in its foundation document, it did not presume to proclaim us a Christian nation, a fundamentally erroneous view which one hears articulated often from public platforms. We're here, a half century after the delegates to the pre-independence conference in London crafted the national ethos of the Bahamas, that is, the moral ideals, one of which is declared to be Christian values in the preamble to our Constitution. Anyone is, of course, free to explore the broad avenues and narrow alleyways of historical injustices, including colonial expansionism, suppression of indigenous cultures, slavery, the list goes on, in the name of Christianity. The reality is that we must learn from history. We cannot alter the past. It is a tempting pursuit, whether through romantic idealism or mere cerebral calisthenics, to head down the path of what if? But it is an essentially pointless exercise, as it traps one in a world of one's own imaginings, better left to the writers of fiction. Related to this approach, common in academia and the media, of presentism, the introduction of present-day ideas and perspectives into depictions or interpretation of the past, an approach which, I would argue, is not only intellectually lazy, but also unfair and dishonest, as it presumes to judge the behavior and beliefs of persons who, in their own time and place in human development, were not, indeed could not have been, possessed of the knowledge and experience of times that they could not have foreseen. Whether formally pronounced for the nation as in a constitution such as ours, or simply taken for granted in any smaller grouping, all the way down to the individual family, every aggregation of human beings has some sort of moral beliefs and principles which sustain the common good while not disregarding the preferences, nay, even needs of the particular members. Notwithstanding my dismissal of the suggestion that Christian values be eliminated from the preamble to our Constitution, it is not a pointless exercise to compare and contrast the ideals of the preamble with the substantive provisions of the Constitution, the body of laws beyond the Constitution. I would argue that Christian values, even if not stated as aforesaid, has for generations, even before emancipation, been part of the Bahamian ethos. I leave it to the students of history and sociology to discern the religious streams of African, Asian, and Native American beliefs, or the secular influences of what is pretentiously called the Enlightenment of 18th century Europe, which would have trickled or coursed into our ethos over the centuries. But geography and history have led us to where we are. Although the industrialized countries of what are commonly referred to as the West are thought to be secular democracies, and, as is lamented by some, post-Christian, the ethos of these societies remains rooted in the more than 2,000 years of what, in a less politically correct time, used to be called Christendom, the matrix for which was the much older Jewish ethos. One of the most striking examples of this is to be found in the celebrated speech of Lord Atkin in his concurring majority judgment in the House of Lords in Donahue and Stevenson, the decision known to generations of law students and others who have studied product liability issues as the case of the snail in the ginger beer bottle. Lord Atkin said, "The liability for negligence is no doubt based upon a general public sentiment of moral wrongdoing for which the offender must pay. But acts or omissions which any moral code would censure cannot in a practical world be treated so as to give a right to every person injured by them to demand relief. In this way, rules of law arise which limit the range of complaints, the range of complainants and the extent of their remedy. The rule that you are to love your neighbor becomes in law, you must not injure your neighbor. And the lawyer's question, who is my neighbor, receives a restricted reply. You must take reasonable care to avoid acts or omissions which you can reasonably foresee would be likely to injure your neighbor. Who then in law is my neighbor? The answer seems to be persons who are so closely and directly affected by my act that I ought reasonably to have them in contemplation as being so affected when I am directing my mind to the acts or omissions which are called into question." Excuse me. Thank you. The common law of England, of which we are inheritors, did not always acknowledge the reality of that uneasy dance between morality into which it is locked. The Bahamas of today, driven by pressure groups both within and without our borders, and, not unlike many other countries, is inexorably, if gradually, expanding the number of laws which have a clearly moral component. Offenses connected with money laundering, human trafficking, and requiring those who have reason to believe that children are being abused to report to report it, and there are already examples. The premier example, of course, is the Constitution itself. What is the Constitution? Especially the chapter which deals with fundamental rights, if not a code of moral ideals crafted into legal form. It is, of course, easy to point out that the Europeans who promulgated Christianity did not always practice what they preached. The Indian nationalist Mahatma Gandhi was not alone in observing, and this is reportedly after having been refused entry into a Christian church in Calcutta on the ground that he was not white or high caste Indian, that if it weren't for Christians, I'd be a Christian. But as the English essayist G.K. Chesterton asserted, the Christian ideal has not been tried and found wanting. It has been found difficult and left untried. Our understanding of what constitutes Christian values has developed over time as part of our evolving standards of acceptable moral behavior. 3 centuries ago, chattel slavery was challenged by few in the enlightened West. Those of you who subscribe to The Plough, which is published by the Bruderhof, which is an international movement of Christian communities, and The Plough is available online, may have seen the recent repost of Ian Olson's August 22 article entitled John Wesley, George Whitefield, and the Gospel That Disrupts, the subtitle of which was Two Preachers Who Shaped American Christianity Diverge Sharply on Whether to Protest or Exploit Slavery, with consequences that persist today. That treasure of the English language, which was taken by officials, missionaries, and traders around the world, and which formed and continues to inform much of our spoken English, even beyond the liturgy of the Anglican Church. And I'm speaking of the 1662 Book of Common Prayer, instructed in its catechism for those preparing for confirmation to reply, "My duty towards my neighbor is to love him as myself, and to do to all men as I would they should do unto me, to love, honor, and succor my father and mother, to honor and obey the king and all that are put in authority under him, to submit myself to all my governors, teachers, spiritual pastors, and masters." And this is the part I'm emphasizing, "to order myself lowly and reverently to my betters." It goes on, "to hurt nobody by word or deed, to be true and just in all my dealing, to bear no malice or hatred in my heart, to keep my hands from picking and stealing and my tongue from ill speaking, lying and slandering, to keep my body in temperance, soberness, and chastity, not to covet or desire other men's good, but to learn and labor truly to get mine own living." And again, I emphasize, "and to do my duty in that state of light into which it shall please God to call me." I recall as a child lustily singing the verse now omitted from modern hymnals of the popular children's hymn, "All Things Bright and Beautiful," written by Cecil Francis Alexander in 1848. And I invite you to compare that date with the date of the establishment of St. Agnes. "The rich man in his castle, the poor man at his gate, God made them high and lowly and ordered their estate." The high-sounding, self-evident truth that all men are created equal in the 1776 Declaration that was the opening salvo in what became the American War for Independence did not include women, slaves, or non-property owners as men created equal. It was not until 1882 in England, and by extension her colonies, that married women could own, buy, and sell their separate property. And 1918 in Britain, and 1920 in the United States, and 1961 in the Bahamas, that women acquired the right to vote. Currently in the Bahamas, are the discussions, oftentimes heated, about corporal and capital punishment, and on a less emotive level, the need to modernize our fault-based divorce laws. From its establishment, nearly 2 centuries ago, St. Agnes has been part of the social architecture of that portion of New Providence still referred to as Over the Hill, a description which, with the expansion of life south of Wolf Road, west of Nassau Street, and east of the old Collins Wall, has lost its original historical meaning. A feature of life in this area, apart from the ardent participation in the religious activities of their particular religious gatherings, was the industry of persons not possessing nature's passport. I leave it to the imaginators, those of you too young to understand the meaning of the phrase, to decipher it. As artisans, seamstresses, tailors, hairdressers, and petty shop, people now use the Americanism mom and pop stores, store owners, they're able to provide goods and services to the community and support their families at the time when the Bahamas was not yet socially and economically what it has become over the last 70 years or so. That same enterprise, which some may call the spark of entrepreneurship, has blossomed and grown both in traditional enterprises, but also in endeavors unimaginable 100 or even 50 years ago. However, we are all familiar with the cliche black crab syndrome, an attitude not peculiar to us as black Bahamians, as I have heard the equivalent self-deprecation on a visit to Ireland, where the analogy was to lobsters in a tank. And a Christian value, the absence of which is augmented by all the modern means of communication, but was an ever-present undercurrent in the gossip-ridden small village life of all the Bahamas, which we tend to view through the distorted lens of selected memory, is the reluctance to take an unalloyed pride in the success, material or otherwise, of others. Employing crude but conventionally understood language, it is not unusual to hear if a person is a man, he must see fit. Or if a woman, she earned that on her back. And generally, where you get that kind of money, he must see fronting for pick your foreigner. This attitude, apart from being devoid of the fundamental Christian virtue of charity, is socially corrosive, and notwithstanding its use and misuse in the unending disputes among pundits and politicians on both sides of the North Atlantic, the description, the politics of envy, I submit, best describes so much of our current national discourse. In the Christian tradition, envy, which someone facetiously defined as the art of counting another's blessings instead of your own, was regarded as one of the 7 deadly sins. And in a post entitled Envy, the Emotion Kept Secret, on the online version of Psychology Today, on the 15th of March 2011, Mary Lanier, PhD, clinical psychologist, wrote, "Envy has to do with feeling unhappy about the success of someone else or about what they have, and at the same time, secretly feeling inferior yourself. Instead of finding success for yourself or improving yourself, you may be envious and want what another person has, or find yourself wishing that the other person would lose that quality or possession in order to make things fair. If you are envious of someone, you may want to put them down, as though this will raise you up or lower everyone else's opinion of them." The quotation with which I began was the opening paragraph of a speech on law and manners by Lord Moulton, who had served both as a cabinet minister and a judge at the Authors Club of London in 1921. Lord Moulton's aphorism was echoed decades later in the report of the Committee on Homosexual Offences and Prostitution, presented to the Parliament of the United Kingdom in September of 1957, popularly referred to as the Wolfenden Report, which is probably best remembered for the view articulated in paragraph 61 that, unless a deliberate attempt is to be made by society, acting through the agency of the law, to equate the sphere of crime with that of sin, there must always remain a realm of private morality and immorality, which is, in brief and crude terms, not the law's business. And it went on to emphasize in the same paragraph, to say this is not to condone or encourage private immorality. On the contrary, to emphasize the personal and private nature of moral or immoral conduct is to emphasize the private and personal responsibility of the individual for his own actions, and that it is a responsibility which a mature agent can properly be expected to carry for himself without the threat of punishment by the law. As we near the quarter mark of the 21st century, we have seen the intensification of this debate and the multiplication of the elements which comprise it. While on the narrowest political level, the Bahamas is an autonomous, independent entity, in reality, we are not and cannot be quarantined from the world beyond our geographical borders. Hence, sooner or later, we will be forced to confront bioethical questions such as abortion, field research and assisted suicide, and social questions such as genetic engineering or marital arrangements other than monogamous heterosexual unions, technological questions such as the effects of artificial intelligence, and the questions of the degree to which human activity contributes to environmental disasters such as hurricanes. On another level, whether as professionals, business owners, or consumers, we all know persons whose approach to their work and to life generally is characterized by an indifference and a morally minimalist approach of what they can get away with, rather than a resolute orientation to seeking to do what is right. This caution is not intended to gainsay the wisdom which underlies the common law principle that all action is permissible, which is not specifically prohibited, and the need to keep litigation within manageable proportions, as Lord Atkin had stressed in the passage quoted above. As you drive the streets of New Providence during the morning and afternoon school run, observe how many children, from kindergarten up through when they themselves reach an age to wreak their own havoc on the roads, are being taught the lesson by their own driving parents that rules do not matter. As you visit the supermarkets, observe how many children are taught to steal by their parents grazing in the produce or snack section and not paying the cashier. When you next present yourself at the port of entry, notice the number of returning residents, children in tow, teaching their children how to be deceitful in declaring their foreign purchases to the customs officer. We continue to hear of persons waiting to find their vehicles left parked outside their homes. More outrageously, this has happened in commercial parking lots during daylight hours, stripped of bumpers, headlights, or other parts. And we know of homes under construction being stripped of fixtures and building materials. Would these despicably antisocial acts occur were it not for a market among otherwise law-abiding citizens, members of the community? Look around, the garbage strewn along our highways, the litter left on beaches, especially after weekends and public holidays, and vehicles and appliances abandoned anywhere that space exists. Mr. Frank Field, then a Labour Member of Parliament for Birkenhead in the United Kingdom, writing in the Christmas 2003 edition of the New Statesman, pointed out that moral codes survive only if they are constantly taught and practiced. Rules are kept by convention, habit, and self-interest, and to a large extent because other people keep them. Self-interest works for the common good. Once a significant number of people start to breach the code with any frequency, self-interest becomes self-centeredness, and the whole system falters. People behave badly, other people then behave badly because they have lost trust. They do not have the confidence to follow what their consciences often prompt them to do. Disorder becomes its own recruiting sergeant. It's probably the humidity why these pages stick together. As I have argued in the past, the apparatus of the state can do precious little against bad behavior in the absence of broad community consensus of conduct, which it simply will not tolerate. Why, for example, is the prevailing social attitude that the police should spend their time chasing burglars and armed robbers rather than otherwise law-abiding traffic offenders? Apart from the fact that persons who abuse their spouses and children are also otherwise law-abiding, the truth of the matter is that an illegally parked car may itself lead to an accident, and accidents, especially those in which speeding is a factor, kill and maim more people than do burglars and armed robbers. In sum, while courts might impose punishment upon conviction after due process, no court or other state agency can curtail objectionable behavior in which a large measure of the population insists on engaging. Hence, my reliance on Lord Bolton's obedience to the unenforceable, among which I dare say are Christian values. I would presume to assert, with little fear of contradiction, that our abiding respect for Christian values challenges each of us to promote and encourage proper behavior among all members of the community, rather than having to prevent and seek after the fact to correct improper behavior. You may have heard what has now become something of a cliche in management circles, the analogy of the boiling frog. A study purportedly conducted some years ago at some unidentified research center found that if a frog were placed in a pan of hot water, it would probably leap out. However, if placed in a pan of cold water and the temperature was gradually raised, the frog would be content and remain in the pan and be boiled to death. Whether such an experiment was in fact conducted is irrelevant. The point of the tale is to illustrate how we, over time, can become conditioned to accepting behavior and practices which earlier would not have been tolerated. So it is, in my view, with the culture of selfishness which seems to be suffusing us, especially in the island of New Providence. Examples abound, such as the casual use of offensive, even obscene language in public spaces, the crude behavior displayed by fans at sporting events or concerts, or the lack of decorum exhibited by patrons at banquets. How do we promote Christian values in an emerging Bahamas? My perhaps circumlocutory response is to recount a story which some of you may have heard, told to me by your late beloved rector, Archdeacon Thompson, during one of our lengthy evening exchanges in our travels outside the capital to conduct the listening sessions of the 1998 National Commission on Crime, chaired by me, and of which he was a member. the story goes, an itinerant missionary priest assigned to travel between several settlements in Andros to conduct a series of services for Christmas was heard to explain, if I keep doing this, I'm soon going to believe it. I thank you for your invitation and wish you all the best as you continue to celebrate 178 years of work and witness in this part of God's vineyard. Thank you. I understand you might have questions.
Yes, we would need you to stay right there, sir. I believe we can all agree that Sir Burton has fortified our understanding of the evolution of Christian values in our Bahama land and has given us fresh insight and information on this fascinating topic. We thank him for gracing us with one of his first public commentaries since demitting office of our highest legal auspices. What an honor for St. Agnes. He spoke of the domains of the law, universality of the common good, the presence of Christian values in the Bahamas since before emancipation, the expansion of laws based on morality, and the eventual need to explore global issues which will require our national response. He reminded us that we are the example of morality and values to our friends, family, and children. May we have another round of applause for such an edifying and enlightening lecture delivered so eloquently by Sir Burton. Now we will have questions on the lecture from our audience. Our amazing ushers will come to you with a microphone so that we can all hear you. You can signify if you have a question by the raising of your hand, and they will come to you from the back of the room. And don't all come at once. I can't believe we're all so shy. We have a question to the front here, please. Right here. May you keep your hand raised so she can see you, please. Thank you.
So Burton, thank you very much for a very interesting and informative discourse this evening. I have just one question to ask. You have talked about the thorny moral issues with which we are now faced, such as cross-gender, intimate relationships, human trafficking, biomedical issues, assisted suicide issues, etc. Would you include the issue of marital rape, which is currently exercising our community in all sectors, both the religious, the secular, the political, and otherwise? And what are the implications of this in relation to, in our emerging Bahamas, in relation to Christian values?
Thank you, ma'am. That is a question on which I will make no public comment whatever.
We thank you for breaking the ice.
I take it the answer is no comment?
Love the energy. So I believe we have Mr. Carter to the back, and we have another question from the front from Mr. Chipman. Mr. Carter?
So Burton, it's so good to see you. SJC, the Giants. Many years ago at FIU, I took a philosophy class, reading Aristotle and Plato and some other philosophers. And for a final exam, the professor gave us a 5,000-word essay to write. The topic was, do we have laws because there's justice? Or is there justice because there are laws? And I parted and parted and parted. was repetitious and repetitious. And I still don't know the answer to that. And I got a C. But do you think that our laws are mainly just based on our spiritual values?
Thank you. If I understood the question correctly, it is something that I alluded to when I think I used the phrase an uneasy dance. There are some areas, I can't think of any society which is wholly excluded or attempted to wholly exclude any concept of morality from its body of positive laws. But on the other side of the coin is that it would be impractical, if not impossible, to turn the formal machinery of the state, more specifically its laws, which are enforceable through the courts, into whatever moral codes may exist at the time. So there will always be this, as I said, it's a dance. A bit of both is probably the most unsatisfying answer that I could give you. What I am tempted to do, and here I should know better than to put my foot into this, is to venture into the question of, I think it was St. Augustine of Hippo, to whom it is attributed, actually it's older than him, lex in justia non ex lex, that an unjust law is no law at all, which is, if you're in a college setting or an academic grouping of some sort, is an attractive prospect, but in terms of an organized society, it's a kind of dangerous road to go down. And this has echoes in what is called, and I fear nowadays, both here and abroad, persons misapply the concept of civil disobedience, because there is the thinking that if a law is unjust, and of course there's you can open up a whole series of arguments about in whose view the law is unjust, whether you are obliged to obey it. But this is the type of dynamic which keeps societies going.
I believe Mr. Chipman has a question on this side, followed by Mr. Albury.
My best answer is that I accept Christian values as a valuable and, I don't want to use the word necessary, but it is a part of what we are. And we who accept Christian values promote it by doing the right thing in every situation with which we are faced. More than that, there is no, it would be unfortunate if every time somebody has to choose as to whether they would do a particular act, whether I would tell the shopkeeper that she put the wrong price on this particular item when she charged me less than it should be, whether, so it's attitudinal, as I said.
Good evening, Sir Burton Hall, and congratulations to St. Agnes for having such a event.
I'm sorry, I'm having difficulty hearing you.
Sorry, I said good evening, and I'm very happy that I got to finally meet you. In 2002, you ruled against the marking of the counterfoil for the 2002 elections. And I want to know if, with that ruling, did you think that were you following Christian values that lead you to believe that to do what is right? Because that was also, apparently that ruling was overturned almost overnight from my reading and in my short stint in politics. So I just want to know what drove your decision, and why do you think it was not accepted by the political class at the time?
Well, as a judge, of course, I never revisit any decision I was to give, but the judges take an oath, and those judges who are present know it well, to do right to all persons according to law. So the obligation that a judge has is to follow the law. A judge can never choose to substitute his own view of what is right over what the law is. I remember before the I think it was 2000, the law was changed. So, well, I went on the bench in 1990, and one used to hear these stories about son who was of no use to anybody in the family, and the father died and didn't get out a will, and the daughters were taking care of them, and he comes and throws everybody out of the house. And I used to think those stories were made up, or people, just a combination of people's different experience, but I was actually faced with such a case. And morally, like everybody else, I would have taken grave exception to it, but the law at that time didn't permit me to do anything but to rule it in the son's favor. Although he dispossessed his sisters and all those, taking care of the ailing. I can't remember which parent it was who had lived in the household, who his female siblings had been taken care of. But judges are obliged to follow the law. I have always been opposed to capital punishment for a variety of reasons. But nevertheless, I was obliged as a judge to impose before the Privy Council got created in recent times, when it was thought that the law was the death penalty was mandatory, and the formula was that you will suffer death in the manner authorized by law, and unless something strange happens, I may go down in history as the last judge to have imposed the death sentence on somebody who was in fact executed, because nobody's been executed since, I think, the chap's name was David Mitchell. But again, that was the law at the time. So notwithstanding my personal objection to capital punishment, and indeed in those days, the judge, after the appeals of what not over, was required to write a letter to the minister responsible for prerogative of mercy. And in the letters that I wrote in all of the cases, I put in my personal objection to the death penalty, but nevertheless, having regard to the law, I had no reason to do otherwise than to say that the law should follow its course. But that is the nature of being. If a judge feels so strongly about a law being unjust that he can't deal with it, then his duty is to step down as a judge. But judges cannot make up law from the bench. There's the ancient Roman proverb, "Justus ere non jus dare." The role of the judge is to say the law, not give it. And exposed as we are in the Bahamas to what goes on in a certain country, which for the purposes of the present discussion will remain nameless, these ongoing debates to what the judges' motives are and whatnot. Judges, as best they could, follow the law. The nature of law is that opinions differ, lawyers differ, judges may differ among themselves, but a judge never, and I'm dealing with my experience here and also my experience sitting on a national tribunal, no judge goes into court and decides he's going to make a wrong decision. Judges, by the oath, choose to follow the law as they see it. Simple as that.
Good evening, church. Good evening, Sir Burton Hall. My question is, as there is no separation between church and state with the moral laws, how involved must the church be in those discussions? And if those laws are drafted, what are the boundaries and requirements of the church's involvement?
Sorry, can you just speak directly into the mic and just a little bit louder, please? Thank you.
Can you hear me now? Okay. So, Sir Burton Hall, my question to you is, my curiosity. As there is no separation between church and state with the moral laws, how involved must the church be in those discussions? And if those laws are drafted, what are the boundaries and the requirements of the church's involvement? And I have a part B, which is off a different subject. I know that my little pet peeve, when I'm watching the Oscars and some of the movies are being announced, I don't get to see them because they don't come here, because is it truth or rumor that the Christian Council vets the movies that come to Fusion? I mean, I could get them on Netflix, but that's just a vent. But the first part was my original question, please. Thank you. And I went to St. John's.
Did I understand? I was having some difficulty hearing you with this, and that's why I asked the moderator whether there was something wrong with the system. But did I understand the question to be what, in my view, is the degree to which the church should be involved in these social issues? Sorry, was that the question? Yeah, well.
Okay, so am I better? Come in the middle.
Yes.
I'll stand by the usher. As there is no separation between church and state with the moral laws, how involved must the church be in those discussions? And if those laws are drafted, what are the boundaries and the requirements of the church's involvement?
Thank you. Now I got it. Well, we don't live in a theocracy, so we are not governed by the church, however you define church. But nevertheless, as I alluded in my passing reference to this ongoing debate about that comes out of North America, the church cannot be excluded from any discussion on anything that affects the life of the community. You have the church, you have trade unions, you have trade associations of all sorts. The nature of lawmaking means that the views of every segment, every identifiable group that makes up the society as a whole is entitled to have their voices heard. And the process of what we loosely call democracy is that the persons who are elected to make the laws make a decision. Inevitably, some persons would be aggrieved or disappointed at the decisions that are made, but we elect representatives to make decisions on our behalf, because every society has to be governed somehow or other. Now, as I said, some people will be disappointed, some people will be angry, some people will be aggrieved, but that is the nature of the process. So the church is entitled to have its voice heard, just like, as I said, the groups that I mentioned. Yes, Bishop.
One of my burning concerns is with the gateway to communion. No, that's not a burning concern. I agree with you on that. But I'm concerned, most persons are concerned about preparation for children understanding something of the mystery of communion. And some feel that the old-fashioned way of preparing children for confirmation was based on the catechism. And the English have a very, you may say, sneaky way of defining the morality of the country in terms of my duty towards God and my name, N or M, and things of that nature. Somehow, I don't believe our children are learning these fundamental factors which were imperative before you were confirmed. So, all about my duty towards my neighbor and how to keep my hands from picking and stealing. These were the means whereby universally throughout the Commonwealth, they were establishing very subtly basic moral faculties, which later on, when you would go to college, you would read the same things in books by Dr. McAdoo, etc., etc. But you were being taught basic morality about how to keep your body in temperance, etc., etc. And we must somehow hold these things up, because they are the subtle ways in which we are teaching our people, what are the duties towards God, my duty towards God, duty towards my neighbor, and how to realize that fundamentally you have a duty towards God and a duty towards your neighbor. Now, I see sometimes in Sunday school children with illustrations of Jesus riding on a white donkey rather than a brown donkey. But the point is, the children are not being taught some of the basic things, and so when they look at how the church should be, they see someone standing at a podium rather than before an altar. All these are subtle ways in which our children are being untaught about the fundamentals. And so that is how we have been taught throughout the ages subtly. And remember, the old catechism had a means whereby at even song, the curate was supposed after the second lesson to teach the congregation and, sort of unwise. You thought about betters and so on, and how you respect your betters and so on. I don't know what that means, but anyhow, all these were means whereby through that catechism which the child was supposed to know, he was being taught about his moral responsibilities, his duty towards God, respect for the Queen, respect for his parents, and so on. Now, Sir Burton also heard you mention Augustine of Hippo. And most people know that Hippo is in Africa, you know. And that's one part of my discourse was to let people know that Christianity is not a white man's religion, but that Mediterranean belt which produced all St. Augustine, Tertullian, and Ambrose, and all of them, the black virgins and martyrs, right there, it is out of us. We somehow allowed the European persons to get a hold of that, teaching people that Christianity basically is from out of us. We took it back to them, and we take more of it back to them so that they don't confuse us with all these new moral principles that they want to introduce. But McAdoo is saying, hey, let's go back to the catechism. I asked the bishop, which bishop did I ask? Most likely I asked both bishops to write a book on the catechism. I said I will write it if I can have a guarantee that our priests and our Sunday school teachers will read it and teach it. All of these things about catechism and duty towards God and duty towards were taught us by my buddy, I can't call him my buddy now, by my revered Archbishop. But you all give me mics and you say I don't talk much. You want a mic? All right, I will allow you.
Good evening. Good evening. Thank you very much for your presentation, Sir Burton. And I'd like to say that the remarks of Bishop Thompson are kind of linked with what I wanted to say. And it's essentially, historically, it was expected that in any society, you would develop your own morality and you would transmit that to the next generation. Of course, people were moving and going back and forth, ideas coming from outside all the time. But those ideas that would come in would not have greater influence on the society. So they would not necessarily overwhelm the existing mores and values and so on. But as you indicated in your presentation, social media is everywhere. The internet is pervasive. And to go along with Bishop Thompson when he talks about the British being savvy in the way in which they changed the narrative. I call it more the way the North Americans sugarcoat things. So everything looks and tastes so good. If you watch the American television and you see their situation comedies, and this goes back from the late 80s, early 90s, every single one had a gay character, and the gay character was always the most likable person on the screen. So one generation later, 25 years later, You ask anyone in the demographic 30 years and under, what is their view on homosexuality or gay marriage, they could not help but say they see nothing wrong with it. So whether you for or against is not the point. The point is these subtle and sometimes very overt mechanisms of cultural and ideological penetration are used, especially through the media in all its iterations. So how then, and I don't know a lot about the law, but I know you're supposed to be judged by the people in your society when you're on trial, and it's supposed to kind of be based on the local understanding of what is good and right. So how then are we supposed to reconcile in this time this obvious interruption to our morality being the dominant morality in our society when we know that the forces are so strong and so constant? I don't know if that's the best formulation of a question, but that's certainly the issue.
Thank you. And I'm going to disappoint you by my answer, which is that, and I say this with the greatest respect to those who are even older than I am, that as I tell my children and grandchildren continually, I am glad that I have fewer summers to see than I have seen, because I don't know that I could survive in the world in which they're growing up. How we insulate ourselves, we can't inoculate ourselves or insulate ourselves. I don't know. And the technology is, when I have my frustrations as my children, there's my son grinning because he knows about to say, when I have my frustrations with the different technological devices which we try to have in our home now, computers and whatnot, they continually hear me say that the computer was an invention of the devil, and I was only half joking, because notwithstanding the convenience of technological advances, whether you're talking about computers, whether you're talking about air travel or whatnot, and it may be my age, but things are moving too fast. It's difficult to keep up before you accommodate one idea. Another is upon you. You, sir, are an educator. I don't know how. There was an article I read within the past day or two on one of the online newspapers about the different words that are in use and what they mean and whatnot. It's difficult to make sense of language any longer. And as I say, things are moving so fast that persons of my age can't keep up. Now, I confess that I have colleagues, judicial and others, who are quite adept at these new things, but believe for them. But I really don't know how we can preserve, to circle back to attempting to answer your question, to circle back to a authentic Bahamian moral code while we are so influenced by, apart from the tourism, because one of the observations was made many years ago is that the Bahamas is one of the few countries in the world where over a year, if you tot up the number of visitors against the number of residents, the imbalance is frightening if you think about it. So you have these influences, and I said you add to that the modernity with electronics and everything else, and All I could say is that we must do the best we could to do what we know to be right. As I say, it's a disappointing answer, but
We have time for one more question. It's been such a robust discussion, but time is running away from us.
Good evening. We're talking a lot about societal behaviors. We can still agree that home, school, and church are strong socializing agents. I am wondering if we haven't missed a golden opportunity with bend the tree while it's young in a different way. And that idea is the way we look at our curriculum. Is it not time that we introduce intentional ethics from K to tertiary? And then you continue by allowing the home and the school to start off the job of moralizing, and you allow the school now to continue it in an intentional way. So the home and the church begins the journey and the sojourn, and then as a national effort, why is it that we cannot make this intentional in our schools and in our curriculum? That's the point I'm posing, that I don't see as much of it as we could.
Thank you. I don't know that any responses necessary from me. Thank you.
Thank you all for your participation. Our question and answer period was rather enlightening and informational. At this time, we'll have a series of presentations. May I please have, I believe, Kevin Hanna, Debbie Strachan, and Andrew Albury please come up at this time. And we will begin with Mr. Hanna.
Good evening, everybody. It's indeed a pleasure to be here this evening to present Sir Burton with a special token of our love and appreciation for working and partnering with us in this 178th celebration of St. Agnes. So at this time, I'd like to present Sir Burton with a special envelope from St. Agnes, which represents a token of our love and appreciation.
Ms. Strachan, Mr. Albury.
Good evening, everybody. Mrs. Hall. Good evening, Mrs. Hall. Good evening, Mrs. Hall, and on behalf of St. Agnes, we would like to present you with this. Okay, it's just a little cumbersome. Mrs. Hall, on behalf of St. Agnes, we would like to present you with this gift as you continue to support your husband. And as a premier Bahamian woman, I am sure that what we are presenting to you this evening is something that you will truly appreciate and love. So on behalf of all of us here at St. Agnes, we present that to you.
This was a surprise, but I do thank you for including me in this, and I shall cherish it and think of you as I use it with pride and boast about your gift to me. Thanks again.
A pleasant good evening to all. I'd like to invite Miss Rose Thompson, please. As we think about the late Archdeacon, we think about how he was involved in every aspect of our society. Wherever it's sports, whether business, whether it's politics, Archdeacon Thompson was involved and heavily involved and in guiding us to where we are today as a country. And so we wonder where he got his power from outside of God, the source. Where he got his strength from. And it was all in this built, this young lady here. She's still young. And so on behalf of the Archdeacon Cartwright and St. Agnes, when all the other priests were here, we give you a token of one of these. But since Archdeacon Cartwright come, he's give you these things. So which I like. So on behalf of Archdeacon, the 178th Anniversary Committee, and the people and the family of St. Agnes, we just want to say thank you for all the years of dedication that you've placed not only behind your husband, but in this great church. And on behalf of all of us, thank you.
Thank you very much for the surprise. I would not have expected this. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you all again. Archdeacon Keith Cartwright will now come with remarks and deliver the vote of thanks. Archdeacon.
Good evening, St. Agnes. What a joy it is to be here as we celebrate on this day, this wonderful 12th of July, our 178th anniversary. We started out this morning with a lovely sung mass. We continued with a wonderful midday mass. And now we are concluding with a wonderful, wonderful discussion this afternoon. Totally enlightening. I want to say thank you, Sir Burton. We are delighted that you have been able to come and share with us. And I know you are reluctant to really come out publicly these days, but let me tell you, it was a pleasure. And to the organizing committee, thank you so very much. It is paying off wonderfully well with all the hard work. But I just want to say how blessed we are here at St. Agnes to have had the wonderful ministry of Archdeacon William Edward Thompson for 32 years. There's not a day that goes by that we don't think about him. We don't say how blessed we were to have had his ministry here. And you could just look around and you can see the hand of Archdeacon Thompson all around St. Agnes and in this community of Grantstown. And so, Sister Rose, and to the members of the family, we are delighted. Bishop Thompson, of course, you hit a home run in terms of our need to really go back to the basics. And that is what Sir Burton was trying to say. It's us. We have to do the right. And we have to make sure that our influence goes further and further down the line by instilling and doing those Christian values in our own lives. No matter how many laws we have, no matter whatever else we may have on the books. You know, we have the laws in terms of cussing. Used to call them 5-pound words. Now the policemen cuss more than the regular people. But you see, it's how we behave that we really cherish the morality. It cannot be imposed. We have to have it for ourselves from our own hearts. And that's the point that Sir Burton was speaking about this evening. And so if we want things to get better in the Bahamas morally, then let's start with ourselves. Me. Let's do what is right. Let's teach our children. Let's show our children by our example. And then you gotta make sure the people who make the laws, they are people of example. All right? We are too tribalism. We just love to put stickers on and we just go and vote. We have to put people in Parliament who are living the example. They make the laws. So thank you all. Thank you all. God bless you. And now our bishop is going to say a few words and give us the benediction. Let's welcome our bishop.
Thank you, Archdeacon Cartwright. Archdeacon and Rector, other members of the clergy, especially Archbishop Drexel Gomez and Bishop Gilbert Thompson. Special guests, my brothers and sisters, good evening. Let me say that it is an honor and a privilege for me to be here in St. Agnes this evening. I never get tired of being here. And it's an honor to be able to join in the celebration of your 178th anniversary, most especially to hear the address of Sir Burton Hall, a son of this parish and this community. St. Agnes is a tremendous institution. That's just what it is. To have survived for 178 years in this community, in the period of time in which she existed, and to be able to be a presence and an influence in this community for 2 centuries is tremendous. Did I say that St. Agnes is a tremendous institution? If these walls could talk, the joys, the sorrows, the aspirations, the disappointments, the falling short, the accomplishments, the relationships, the lives, the interactions. If these walls could talk. That's what happens in a tremendous institution that's been around for 200 years. I'm a son of this parish. I was in Edith Riley's Sunday school class right down in the back on this side of the guardroom. I began here as a server, as a member of the Boys Brigade, the Sunday school, and the youth group. And it is tremendous for me to sit here this evening, to ponder what would happen if the walls could talk, but also to consider my own memories of growing up here, all of the people and all of the experiences. This is what history is made of. A heritage that we receive, experiences and formation that we have, and then giving back to the present age so that others can come after us and have something to receive. We thank God for this institution. It's a privilege for me to serve as the bishop of the diocese, to sit in the first row at the end of the row. That's a privilege. And I would not be able to do that if I had not had the formation that I had here. If I did not know some of you when your hair was black or when you had hair at all. You see, that's history. That's history. And we are privileged to be able to share in it. It's an honor for me to sit next to Archbishop Gomez, another son of this parish, to sit next to Bishop Thompson, another son of this parish. It's an honor for me because men like them have gone before to help me to be the man that I am. This is history. This is what we must cherish. This is what we must continue to celebrate. This is what we must expose our children and grandchildren to. And that is why anniversaries of dedication should not pass unobserved. And that is why I commend you, Archdeacon, your committee, and the parish for keeping this observance with its various activities this year, as you do every year. Let us have an appreciation for where we've come from. Let's embrace the best of our heritage. Let's fortify it by our faithfulness today so that we can pass it on to young Nyla Seminit and others. The baby in the back that's making his or her presence felt. We need that sound. Because one day, that baby may be standing here, giving the remarks and the benediction. Because I was a baby sitting up front here on this side aisle, in my mother and my grandmother's custody. And so, my friends, it's history. We must celebrate it and pass it on. And we must ask God to make us good stewards of what we have received. Amen? Amen. I thank you, Sir Burton, for your remarks in this setting and as a part of this celebration. And I bid all of us to serve as we are able, to use our gifts, to be available when we are called upon, and to lift up the name of the Lord. Please stand for the benediction. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. Be with us, Lord, as we leave your house. Help us to remember that no matter where we go, we never leave your presence. And may your blessing be upon us this night, that blessing of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. May it be upon us now and forevermore.
Amen.
Go in peace and serve the Lord.
In the name of Christ. Amen. Amen.
Please remain standing. As we draw this evening's proceedings to a close, we also remind you of our remaining 178th anniversary events starting tomorrow. Please wear your pin tomorrow, Thursday, the 13th of July. Friday, the 14th of July, is our cultural extravaganza at St. John's Emerald Room at 7 p.m. On Saturday, we have a full lineup where we will have morning mass at 9 a.m., prayer brunch at 10:30 a.m., and a Junkanoo rush out at 5 p.m. Our special anniversary service will be on Sunday, the 16th of July, and followed by a gala reception in the Gardens of St. Agnes. I believe that is 5 p.m. On Sunday. 5? Yes. Okay, great. As we continue standing for our closing hymn, Now Thank We All Our God, found in your program, we thank you again for joining us, and we invite you to join us afterwards for refreshments. Just after, may I also have the families of Archdeacon Thompson, Sir Burton, the clergy, and the committee join me at the front for a photograph. May we now raise our tune.